The moment I walked into that private room at the restaurant, I knew this wasn't the casual family brunch my mom had promised. The lights were too bright, the table too formal, and there was a stack of legal documents sitting in the middle next to a pen that wasn't mine. I saw the man in the suit before I saw the menu. My mom smiled like this was normal and said we just needed to discuss what's fair after my dad's death. That's when I started counting how many people were in the room against me. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 28 years old. I work remotely in tech, which means I spend most of my days in sweatpants solving problems for people I'll never meet while drinking too much coffee and forgetting what day of the week it is. I'm good at my job because I understand systems, patterns, how things are supposed to work versus how they actually work when someone's trying to game them. That skill, that ability to see when code is broken or when someone's running a scam, that's what my dad gave me. He taught me to read contracts to understand terms of service, to know the difference between what people say and what they're actually doing. He taught me that in this world, your data is worth more than the cash in your wallet and your signature is worth more than both. He never imagined I'd need those lessons to protect myself from my own mother. But here we are. Let me back up and tell you how I got to that restaurant, to that moment when I walked into a room full of people who'd already decided I was the problem. My parents divorced when I was 15. Not the screaming, throwing dishes kind of divorce you see in movies. The cold, calculated, lawyer-mediated kind where everything gets divided down to the last fork and someone keeps spreadsheets of who paid for what during the marriage. My dad, Richard, was a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company in San Diego. He was the kind of guy who drove the same Honda Civic for 12 years because it still ran fine, who packed leftovers for lunch every day, who got genuinely excited about index funds and compound interest. He wasn't rich. He was just responsible in a way that looks boring until you realize how rare it actually is. My mom, Laura, hated that about him. She wanted the big house in the gated community. She wanted the luxury SUV parked in the circular driveway. She wanted vacation photos that made other people jealous and furniture that looked like it came from a magazine spread. She wanted a life that required more money than my dad made, and when he wouldn't go into debt to fund her Instagram aesthetic, she decided she'd rather start over. California is a community property state, which basically meant the court looked at everything my parents had built together during the marriage and cut it exactly in half. My mom saw it as finally getting her fair share so she could upgrade her life. My dad saw it as losing half of everything he'd worked for and still having to pay alimony and child support on top of it. After the divorce, I stayed mostly with my dad in a modest 2-bedroom condo in Carlsbad. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was old. The kitchen was small. But I could hear the ocean if I opened my bedroom window at night. And on Friday evenings my dad would let me pick dinner from DoorDash and we'd eat tacos straight from the containers while watching Netflix on the couch. He showed me how to use budgeting apps, explained what a 401k was, taught me why credit scores mattered more than designer handbags. He didn't lecture. He just lived it. While other kids' parents were bragging about new cars and exotic vacations, my dad bragged about paying off his credit card in full every month. About maxing out his retirement contributions. About having 6 months of expenses saved in his emergency fund. I thought it was boring back then. Turns out it was the most important education I ever got. My mom, meanwhile, moved up the coast to Orange County and seemed to reinvent herself overnight. She married Victor, a real estate agent who specialized in selling homes that looked like movie sets. Suddenly her Facebook was full of carefully staged photos from wine tastings and backyard barbecues. She had 2 stepkids now, Mia and Ethan, and they all wore coordinated outfits in their Christmas card photos like they were auditioning for a lifestyle brand. I was technically still her daughter, but I felt more like a guest star who'd been written out of the show. Every time I scrolled past her posts, it was the same performance. #blessed. #family goals. #living my best life. I was never in the photos. She didn't call to ask how my college classes were going or what I wanted to do after graduation. She called to tell me about Mia making the honor roll or Ethan winning some sports tournament. The only time my name came up was when she was complaining to my dad about money, about how child support wasn't enough, about how I needed things she couldn't afford. My dad would come home from those phone calls looking tired, but he'd shake it off by making popcorn on the stove and putting on some old movie we'd both seen 100 times. On weekends, we'd go hiking in the local canyons or drive up the coast for cheap day trips. He'd point at the houses on the cliffs and say, "People spend their whole lives chasing those views, but they still go to bed with the same problems as everyone else." Better to build something solid that actually belongs to you. I didn't fully understand what he meant until much later. Until the night a drowsy driver on the I-5 crossed 3 lanes of traffic and turned my entire world into before and after. It was a Tuesday. Late. My dad had stayed at the office to finish a code release because that's who he was. The guy who made sure things worked even when no one was watching. He was driving home in the rain when it happened. A chain reaction. Multiple vehicles. By the time the highway patrol called me, my dad was already gone. The funeral was small and simple. Exactly how he would have wanted it. A few co-workers from his tech company. Some neighbors from the condo building. Me, standing there trying to breathe around the weight in my chest. And my mom, dressed in black like a movie widow, Victor at her side, Mia and Ethan standing behind them like props in a grief performance. She cried loud enough for everyone to hear. Hugged people she hadn't spoken to in years. Told anyone who would listen how heartbroken she was. How much she'd loved him despite everything. I stood next to his urn thinking, you didn't love this man. You loved the life he couldn't give you, and you never forgave him for it. After the service, while people were still drifting toward the parking lot, a woman in a navy blazer approached me. She introduced herself as Elena Martinez, my dad's attorney. We sat at a metal picnic table outside the funeral home, the air still heavy with the smell of flowers and stale coffee, and she explained that my dad had been very thorough with his estate planning. He'd updated his will multiple times after the divorce. He'd been concerned, she said carefully, about potential pressure from my mother. That was lawyer speak for. He knew my mom would come for his money the second he was gone. According to the will, everything that was unquestionably his separate property after the divorce, plus everything he'd built since, came directly to me. The condo in Carlsbad. His tech stocks, mostly Apple and index funds he'd been contributing to for 20 years. His IRA and 401k rollovers. It wasn't billionaire money, but it was the careful, deliberate wealth of a man who'd spent his entire adult life being responsible. The kind of wealth that compounds silently while everyone else is buying things they can't afford to impress people they don't like. I should have felt guilty that it all went to me. Should have felt like I didn't deserve it. Instead, I just felt sad and strangely proud, like my dad had managed to protect me even after he was gone. Elena walked me through the California probate process, explaining how the court would validate the will, oversee the transfer of assets, make sure no one could challenge it without legitimate legal grounds. She looked me directly in the eye and said, "Your father was very clear, Sarah. He wanted you to have control of your future without interference." The word interference hung in the air like a threat. And right on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. Long paragraphs about how we needed to talk, how dad would want me to think about the whole family, how we should handle this date like adults. She didn't ask how I was doing. Didn't ask if I was okay. She asked when we could discuss the numbers. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt at first. Answered politely. Said we could talk after probate was underway. Mentioned that dad had an attorney handling everything. She ignored that part and went straight to asking for rough estimates of what he'd left. Like she was pricing a house listing. When I didn't respond fast enough, the guilt trip started. She reminded me of all the time she'd taken care of me as a kid, how expensive raising a teenager had been, how Mia and Ethan needed help with college expenses. It was always the same phrase, "You have to think about the family." What she meant was, "You have to think about my family." The one she'd built after she left us. I forwarded the messages to Elena. She told me not to share specific numbers, not to sign anything, not to agree to any private arrangements. She said if my mom wanted to challenge the will, she could hire her own lawyer and file in court. But based on the paperwork my dad had prepared, it would be a long shot at best. I decided to trust the woman my dad had trusted, even if it meant disappointing the woman who'd given birth to me. That's when my mom's tone shifted from emotional manipulation to thinly veiled threats. She started leaving voicemails about how lawyers were expensive, how probate could drag on for years, how my credit could be affected if there was a messy legal fight. She'd sprinkle in something sentimental like, "I'm just trying to look out for you," and then slide right into, "You don't want this to get ugly, do you?" It was like listening to a sales pitch wrapped in a Hallmark card. The more I held my ground, the more desperate she sounded. I stopped answering her calls. Started documenting everything instead. Dates, times, what she said. My dad had taught me that money fights make people reckless, and reckless people leave evidence. A few weeks after the funeral, the probate court officially confirmed the will. The condo, the accounts, the stocks, everything transferred into my name. Elena sent me a neat folder with certified copies and a professional email about next steps. Within 24 hours, my mom sent me an email too. Subject line: family meeting. The body was full of corporate speak phrases like, clear the air, and discuss options, and find a fair solution. She said it would just be a small group, nothing formal. She suggested a nice restaurant in Irvine, said she'd make a reservation in a private room so we could talk openly without being disturbed. I stared at that email for a long time, my stomach twisting into knots. My dad had done everything right, followed every rule, protected me legally in every way possible. And somehow I still felt like prey being invited to walk calmly into a trap. I forwarded the email to Elena with a simple question: should I go? She didn't even hesitate. Called me instead of replying by email. You don't have to go alone, she said. In fact, you shouldn't. If your mother wants to discuss legal matters, I should be there to make sure nothing gets misrepresented. She's going to be furious if I bring a lawyer, I said. Good, Elena replied. Let her be furious. You're not going into that room to make her happy. You're going to protect what your father worked his entire life to give you. So we made a plan. Simple, strategic. I would arrive first, see who was there, see what they put on the table. Elena would wait nearby. When I texted her, she'd come in. That way my mom couldn't claim I'd ambushed her, even though that was exactly what my mom was planning to do to me. The day of the meeting, I drove up to Irvine with my stomach in knots and a folder in my passenger seat. Inside were copies of the will, the probate confirmation, and a notepad where I'd written down dates and summaries of every guilt-laden voicemail and manipulative text my mom had sent since the funeral. It was my paper shield against years of being told I was selfish whenever I didn't immediately give her what she wanted. The restaurant was one of those places with expensive lighting and servers who materialized silently to refill water glasses you didn't know were empty. A hostess in all black led me past couples on dates and business lunches to a frosted glass door at the back marked, private. My heart was hammering against my ribs as she opened it. And that's when I stepped into the scene I described at the beginning. My mom at the head of the table like a CEO running a board meeting. Victor next to her in a blazer that looked expensive but slightly too tight. Mia and Ethan on the other side, flanking a man in a gray suit with a laptop open in front of him. No menus. No casual brunch setup. Just a pitcher of water, a stack of papers, and a pen placed with surgical precision in the center of the table. Sarah, you made it, my mom said, smiling like I'd arrived early to help set up for a party. We just want to talk. The man in the suit stood and offered his hand. He introduced himself as Daniel Reeves, an attorney helping the family explore options regarding my father's estate. The way he said family made it sound like we were all equals here, all mourning the same loss, all entitled to the same outcome. I sat down slowly. The top page of the document stack had my name on it in bold letters. Below that were phrases like voluntary redistribution agreement, and irrevocable transfer, and equitable division. My mouth went dry. Before you panic, my mom said, leaning forward with a practiced look of concern, this is just about making sure everyone is taken care of. Your father's will didn't account for the reality of the current family situation. Things are different now. She gestured toward Mia and Ethan like they were line items in a budget presentation. College is expensive. Life is expensive. We just want to make sure this is handled fairly. Daniel took over, explaining in smooth professional tones that the document was a family settlement agreement. It would allow me to voluntarily transfer a reasonable portion of the inheritance into a shared trust that would benefit everyone. Reasonable, according to the numbers I could see on the page, meant approximately 65%. He said it the same way someone might suggest splitting a dinner check. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was burning. My dad had worked overtime, driven that dangerous commute, skipped vacations, saved every spare dollar for decades. And now I was being told that honoring his explicit wishes made me selfish. No one's trying to take anything from you, my mom added, which was almost funny considering the legal document in front of me literally existed to take things from me. We just don't want this to turn into a long, ugly legal battle. That would hurt everyone, especially you. Your credit, your future. This way we handle it privately, like adults. I thought about the texts she'd sent. The voicemails where her voice went sharp whenever she said the word, fair. I thought about my dad sitting on the edge of my bed years ago, telling me I didn't owe anyone my future just because they shared my last name. I took a slow breath. So if I don't sign this, I said carefully, what happens? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victor shifted uncomfortably. Mia stared at the table. Ethan looked at his phone like he desperately wished he was anywhere else. Daniel folded his hands and gave me a look that was probably supposed to seem kind. Then this becomes complicated, he said. Your mother has grounds to contest certain aspects of the probate process. There could be delays, legal fees, public records. It might affect your ability to access the assets quickly. Conflict is stressful for everyone. We're just trying to help you avoid that. My mom jumped in, her voice tightening just enough to crack the sympathetic mask. We're giving you a chance to do the right thing, Sarah. You're not the only one who lost someone. Mia's applying to colleges. Ethan has his whole future ahead of him. We're asking you to think about this family. I looked at each of them. The lawyer billing by the hour. Victor, who'd married into my mother's hunger for status. 2 teenagers who'd grown up in a world where I was barely mentioned. And my mother, who could cry on demand and talk about love while pushing a pen toward my hand. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my voice came out steady. How many people are in this room? I asked softly. My mom frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I let my eyes move around the table slowly, deliberately. 1, I said, nodding at my mom. 2, looking at Victor. 3, 4, Mia and Ethan. I paused on Daniel. 5. The room went completely silent except for the muffled sounds of the restaurant beyond the door. That's a lot of people, I said, meeting my mom's eyes. Confusion flickered across her face. Then irritation. Sarah, this isn't a joke. You're right, I said. It's not. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and opened my text messages. I'd already typed the message earlier that morning, had it saved in drafts. All I had to do was hit send. 1 word. Now. I set the phone face down on the table next to the unsigned document. Funny thing is, I said, feeling something close to calm settle over me for the first time since I'd walked in, I only brought one person too. A sharp knock sounded on the frosted glass door. The hostess opened it, and Elena Martinez stepped into the room in her navy blazer. A familiar legal folder in her hands and the kind of smile that makes opposing counsel nervous. Laura, Elena said pleasantly, like they were old friends running into each other at a coffee shop. I hear you wanted to discuss Sarah's inheritance. I think that's a conversation I should probably be part of, don't you? The moment Elena walked into that private room, the entire energy shifted. It was like someone had opened a window in a space that had been deliberately sealed shut, and suddenly everyone could feel the pressure change. My mom's carefully constructed smile froze on her face. Victor sat up straighter, his hand moving to adjust his collar like he was suddenly aware of how tight it felt. Daniel Reeves, the attorney my mom had brought to intimidate me, looked at Elena with the particular expression lawyers get when they realize they're no longer the smartest person in the room. Mia and Ethan just looked confused, which honestly was probably the most genuine emotion anyone on their side of the table had shown all day. I'm sorry, my mom said, recovering quickly with that practiced tone of wounded confusion she'd perfected over the years. I don't understand why Sarah felt she needed to bring legal representation to a family discussion. We're just trying to have an honest conversation about what's fair. Elena set her folder down on the table with a soft thud that somehow sounded louder than it should have. She pulled out the chair next to me and sat down with the kind of calm authority that comes from decades of practice. Laura, if this is just a family discussion, why is there a settlement agreement drafted by an attorney sitting in the middle of the table? Why does that agreement have specific legal language about irrevocable transfers and waivers of future claims? That's not a conversation. That's a contract. She opened her folder and pulled out a document I recognized immediately. My father's will, with the probate court's official stamp clearly visible. Let me save everyone some time, Elena continued. Richard Chen's will was properly executed, witnessed, and filed. It went through probate without any legitimate challenges. The court validated it 6 weeks ago. Everything he owned as separate property after the divorce, plus everything he accumulated in the 12 years since, has been legally transferred to his daughter Sarah. There's no ambiguity here. No gray area. No community property claims because the marriage ended in 2011. Daniel cleared his throat. With all due respect, Ms. Martinez, family members can still reach voluntary agreements about estate distribution. California law allows for voluntary being the operative word, Elena interrupted smoothly, which implies choice made without pressure, threat, or coercion. Would you like me to read the text messages Laura sent Sarah over the past month? The ones where she threatened legal complications, credit damage, and years of expensive litigation if Sarah didn't cooperate. She pulled out another stack of papers, and I recognized the printouts I'd given her. Screenshots of every text, every voicemail transcript, every email where my mom had dressed up threats in the language of family obligation. My mom's face went pale. Those were taken out of context. I was just trying to help Sarah understand the situation. The situation, Elena said, is that your ex-husband left everything to his daughter. You're not entitled to any of it. You received your community property settlement in the divorce 12 years ago. You've been receiving alimony and child support according to the court order. Everything Richard accumulated after that belongs to Sarah. We're not talking about legal entitlement, Victor said, speaking for the first time. His voice had that smooth real estate agent quality, like he was trying to close a deal. We're talking about moral obligation. Family helping family. Sarah's mother raised her, sacrificed for her. Surely that counts for something. Elena turned to look at him with a kind of expression that could freeze water. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to be very direct with you. You have zero standing in this conversation. You married Laura 6 years after her divorce from Richard. You have no relationship to Richard's estate, no claim to his assets, and frankly, no business being in this room at all. Victor's face flushed red. He opened his mouth to respond, but my mom put her hand on his arm to stop him. This is exactly what I was afraid of, my mom said, her voice taking on that trembling quality she used when she wanted to seem vulnerable. Sarah's been turned against her own family by lawyers who just want to bill hours. We're not trying to steal from you, honey. We just want to make sure everyone is taken care of. Your father would have wanted that. That did it. That was the line that snapped whatever restraint I'd been holding on to. Don't, I said, and my voice came out harder than I'd ever heard it. Don't you dare tell me what my father would have wanted. You know what he actually wanted? He wrote it down. He had it notarized. He filed it with the court. He wanted me to have control of my own future without people like you using guilt and manipulation to take it away from me. Sarah, my mom started, but I wasn't finished. You want to talk about sacrifice? About raising me? You got child support every month for years. You got alimony. You got half of everything in the divorce. And the second you remarried and had your perfect new family, I became an inconvenience. I wasn't in your Christmas photos. I wasn't invited to your backyard barbecues. I didn't even get a phone call on my birthday last year. But now that Dad's gone and there's money involved, suddenly I'm family again? Suddenly you care about fairness. The room was completely silent. Mia was staring at her lap. Ethan had his phone in his hand, but he'd stopped pretending to look at it. Victor was looking at my mom like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. Daniel Reeves was doing what all smart lawyers do when their client's case is falling apart. Staying very, very quiet. My mom's eyes were shiny with tears, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about causing them. The answer is no, I said clearly. I'm not signing anything. I'm not transferring anything. I'm not negotiating my inheritance with people who've spent years treating me like I didn't exist until I became useful. Elena stood up. I think we're done here. Sarah, we can go. But my mom wasn't ready to let it end. She stood up too, her chair scraping against the floor. You're making a huge mistake. This family is giving you a chance to do the right thing without lawyers and courts and public records. If you walk out of here, this gets messy. Do you understand me? This gets very, very messy. And there it was. The threat she'd been building toward the entire time, finally said out loud. Elena stepped between us. Laura, I'm going to give you some free legal advice. If you file a frivolous challenge to this probate case, you will lose. You will pay your own legal fees, which will be substantial, and you may be ordered to pay Sarah's legal fees as well. If you attempt to harass, threaten, or coerce Sarah in any way, she can file for a restraining order. If you try to access any of her accounts or assets without authorization, that's a crime. Do you understand what I'm telling you? My mom stared at Elena with pure hatred in her eyes. You're poisoning my daughter against me. I'm protecting my client, Elena said. There's a difference. I picked up my bag and stood. My legs felt shaky, but I managed to walk toward the door without stumbling. As I passed my mom, she grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firm enough to make me stop. Your father would be ashamed of you, she whispered. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face. My father spent the last 12 years of his life making sure you couldn't do exactly what you're trying to do right now. The only person who should be ashamed is you. I pulled my arm away and walked out. Elena followed, and behind us I could hear my mom's voice rising, Victor trying to calm her down, Daniel Reeves saying something about regrouping and considering options. The restaurant's main dining room felt surreally normal after the intensity of that back room. People eating lunch, having quiet conversations, completely unaware that my entire family had just imploded 15 feet away from their Caesar salads. Elena and I didn't speak until we were outside in the parking lot, the Southern California sun almost offensive in its brightness after the dim restaurant interior. You did really well in there, Elena said. I know that couldn't have been easy. I feel like I'm going to throw up, I admitted. That's normal, she said. You just set a boundary with someone who spent your entire life teaching you that boundaries are betrayal. Your body doesn't know the difference between doing the right thing and doing something dangerous. Give it time. We stood there for a moment, and then I asked the question that had been building in my chest since my mom's final threat. When she said this was going to get messy, what did she mean? What can she actually do? Elena was quiet for a second, choosing her words carefully. Legally? Not much. The will is solid. The probate is complete. She has no grounds for a legitimate challenge. But people who are desperate and angry don't always stay within legal boundaries. They probe for weaknesses. They look for vulnerabilities. Like what? Like trying to access your accounts if they have old information. Like attempting to social engineer their way into your financial life. Like phishing emails or calls pretending to be from your bank. Your mother knows a lot about you, Sarah. She knows your birthday, your social security number, probably the answers to most of your security questions. If she's angry enough and desperate enough, she might try to use that information. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. So what do I do? You lock everything down, Elena said. Change all your passwords. Enable two-factor authentication on every account. Update your security questions with answers only you would know. Consider freezing your credit with the 3 major bureaus. And you document everything. Every text, every call, every email. If this escalates, you'll want a paper trail. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. Elena's warnings playing on repeat in my head. The condo felt different when I walked in, like I was seeing it through a new lens. This wasn't just my home anymore. It was an asset someone wanted to take from me. That night I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and went through every single account I had. Bank accounts, investment accounts, credit cards, student loan portals, even my DoorDash and Netflix passwords. I changed everything. Set up two-factor authentication that sent codes to my phone. Changed my security questions from real answers to nonsense phrases only I would remember. My mother's maiden name? No longer her actual maiden name, but a random word I'd never forget but she'd never guess. The elementary school I attended? Not the real one, but the name of a street from a city I'd never lived in. It took 3 hours. My eyes burned from staring at screens and typing. But by the time I was done, I felt fractionally safer. Like I'd built a digital moat around myself that my mom couldn't cross without leaving evidence. The next morning, I called the 3 credit bureaus and froze my credit. It was surprisingly easy, just a phone call and some verification questions. And suddenly no one could open new accounts in my name without me personally unfreezing it first. I felt paranoid doing it. Felt like I was overreacting, being dramatic, letting Elena's warnings turn me into someone who saw threats everywhere. Then I checked my email and the paranoia didn't seem so unreasonable anymore. Sitting in my inbox was an email that looked exactly like the ones my bank usually sent. Same logo, same color scheme, same professional formatting. The subject line said, "Important. Verify your account activity." It claimed there had been suspicious login attempts and I needed to click a link to verify my identity and secure my account. I hovered my mouse over the link without clicking it. The URL was close to my bank's real website, but not quite right. One letter different. The kind of detail you'd only notice if you were already suspicious. Someone had sent me a phishing email. And they'd sent it less than 24 hours after I'd refused to sign over my inheritance. I took a screenshot, then called my bank using the number on the back of my actual debit card. The representative confirmed they hadn't sent any security emails and there had been at least 2 failed login attempts on my account from an unrecognized device in the past 12 hours. My hands started shaking. Can you see what information they tried to use to log in? I asked. I can't share specific details, but I can tell you the attempts used correct username and partial account information. They failed because of incorrect password and security verification. So someone who knew enough about me to have my username and some account details had tried to get into my bank account. Twice. Right after I'd refused to give them money legally. The representative helped me add additional security layers, flagged my account for monitoring, and suggested I file a police report. I did, that same afternoon, sitting in my living room on hold with the local police department's non-emergency line, trying to explain that I thought my own mother was attempting to commit identity theft. The detective I eventually spoke with was professional, but I could hear the skepticism in his voice. Family financial disputes were messy, he said. Unless there was clear evidence of criminal intent, it was often hard to pursue. He suggested I also file a report with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, the IC3. It sounded dramatic, like something people did when Nigerian princes tried to scam them. Not when their mom lived an hour away in Orange County. But I filled out the form anyway. Attached screenshots of the phishing email, the failed login attempts, the threatening texts my mom had sent. I sent it all to Elena too, and her response was immediate and serious. This isn't just harassment anymore, she wrote. This is someone attempting to access your financial accounts without authorization. That's a crime. Document everything. If this escalates, we're going to need a clear record that you tried to handle this appropriately. I sat in my condo that night, all the lights off, looking out at the ocean in the distance. Somewhere out there, my mom was probably in her big house in Orange County, maybe talking to Victor, maybe planning her next move, maybe telling Mia and Ethan how ungrateful I was, how I'd betrayed the family. And I realized something that made my chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with fear. My mother wasn't going to stop. She wasn't going to accept no as an answer. She was going to keep pushing, keep probing, keep looking for a way to take what she thought she deserved. Because to her, this wasn't about love or family or fairness. It was about money. It had always been about money. And people who are desperate and angry and convinced they're entitled to something they don't have, they don't stop until they're forced to stop. I just had no idea yet how ugly it was about to get before someone finally forced her to stop. The phishing email wasn't an isolated incident. It was the opening move in what became a systematic campaign to get access to my inheritance by any means necessary. Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 more fake security alerts, each one slightly more sophisticated than the last. One claimed to be from my investment brokerage. Another supposedly came from the Social Security Administration saying my benefits had been suspended. The third was particularly clever. A fake notice from the probate court saying I needed to re-verify my identity to maintain control of the estate assets. Every single one was a trap. Every single one would have handed over my login credentials if I'd been careless enough to click. But I wasn't careless. My dad had taught me better than that. I forwarded each email to Elena, to my bank's fraud department, and to the FBI's IC3 portal. I was building a file, piece by piece, of every attempt to circumvent the legal system my mom claimed to respect. What I didn't expect was for her to get physical about it. I'd installed a Ring doorbell camera after the restaurant meeting, mostly because Elena had suggested it and it seemed like a cheap insurance policy. The camera sat there for days recording nothing more interesting than package deliveries and my neighbor walking his dog. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon while I was on a Zoom call for work, my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I glanced at the notification and my stomach dropped. The thumbnail showed a car I recognized instantly. A silver Lexus SUV that I'd seen in countless Instagram posts. Victor's car. I muted myself on the Zoom call and opened the Ring app. The live feed showed Victor's SUV parked at the curb in front of my building, engine idling. He was sitting in the driver's seat with a laptop balanced on his knees, the screen's glow lighting up his face in the shadowy interior of the car. A second notification popped up. Motion detected near mailboxes. I switched to the second camera, the one I'd mounted to cover the building's mail area. My mom was standing there, phone pressed to her ear, looking around like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. She wasn't getting mail. She was just standing there, talking on the phone, glancing back toward Victor's car every few seconds. Then my banking app sent a push notification. Unrecognized device attempting to access your account. I felt my heart hammering as I watched the pieces come together in real time. My mom at my building, on her phone. Victor in his car with a laptop. My bank account getting hit with a login attempt at the exact same moment. I started screen recording on my phone, capturing everything. The ring footage, the banking app notification, the timestamp showing they all happened within 60 seconds of each other. I let it run for 5 full minutes, watching my mom pretend to check her phone while staying suspiciously close to my building's mailboxes. Watching Victor's fingers move on his keyboard. Watching my banking app send 2 more alerts about failed authentication attempts. When they finally left, I had everything I needed. I called Elena before I called anyone else. She didn't even let me finish explaining before she said, "Send me everything. Every second of video, every screenshot, every notification. Right now." I did, watching the files upload while my hands shook with a combination of adrenaline and something that felt almost like vindication. They weren't just making vague threats anymore. They weren't just sending phishing emails from anonymous accounts. They'd driven to my home, coordinated their movements, and actively attempted to break into my financial accounts while physically present outside my building. "This is attempted identity theft," Elena said when she called me back 15 minutes later. "This isn't a gray area, Sarah. This isn't a family disagreement. They drove to your residence and attempted to fraudulently access your accounts. That's a crime. What do I do?" I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "We call the police. Not the non-emergency line this time. We file a formal report with evidence. And we get a restraining order before they try something worse." That night, 2 police officers came to my condo. They watched the ring footage on my laptop, reviewed the banking notifications, took notes in their little spiral notebooks. One of them, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, looked at me and said, "This is your mother?" "Yes." "And she's attempting to access your bank accounts without authorization?" "Yes." She exchanged a look with her partner. Family financial abuse is more common than people think. Usually we can't do much because there's no evidence. But you've got them on video coordinating an attack on your accounts. That's prosecutable. They took my statement, gave me a case number, and told me they'd be following up with the detective division. Elena filed for an emergency restraining order the next morning. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. I thought the police report and the restraining order filing would be enough to scare my mom into backing off. I thought wrong. The messages started the next day. Not from my mom directly, she was too smart for that now. But from Mia, the 17-year-old stepsister I'd barely had 5 conversations with in my entire life. "Why are you doing this to our family? Mom is devastated. She just wanted to talk and you're trying to send her to jail. Do you know how selfish you look right now?" Then Ethan. "My mom has been crying for 2 days. She said you called the cops on her for trying to help you with your accounts. That's insane. You're insane." Then people I barely knew. Cousins I hadn't seen since I was 12. My mom's friends from her book club. All of them sending variations of the same message. "You're tearing this family apart. You're choosing money over your own mother. Don't you have any compassion?" I didn't respond to any of them. Just took screenshots and added them to the file Elena was building. Evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign. Proof that my mom was using other people to continue pressuring me even after being caught committing a crime. The restraining order hearing was in a small courtroom that smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. My mom showed up dressed like she was going to church. Conservative dress, minimal jewelry, the perfect picture of a concerned mother who'd been wrongly accused. She had a new lawyer with her, a woman this time, someone who probably cost 3 times what Daniel Reeves charged. I sat next to Elena while the judge reviewed the evidence. He was an older man, probably close to retirement, with reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He watched the ring footage without expression, looked at the bank notifications, reviewed the police report. Then he looked at my mom. Mrs. Brennan, did you go to your daughter's residence on the date and time shown in this video? My mom's lawyer started to answer, but the judge held up his hand. I asked Mrs. Brennan. My mom cleared her throat. I was in the area. I thought I might stop by to see if Sarah was home. I wanted to talk to her. Were you on your phone while standing near her mailbox? I might have been. I don't remember exactly. And was your husband in the vehicle shown in the footage? Yes, Victor was with me. Was he using a laptop at the time your daughter's banking app registered multiple unauthorized access attempts? I don't know what he was doing. He might have been checking his email. The judge looked over his glasses at her. Mrs. Brennan, I've been doing this for 30 years. I can spot a coordinated effort when I see one. You and your husband drove to your daughter's residence and attempted to gain unauthorized access to her financial accounts. The timing isn't coincidental. The evidence is clear. My mom's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, there's no direct evidence linking Mrs. Brennan to the login attempts. Being in the area at the same time isn't proof of. The login attempts originated from an IP address associated with a mobile hotspot, Elena said, standing up. We subpoenaed the records from the internet service provider. That hotspot is registered to Victor Brennan's business account. The same Victor Brennan who was sitting in his car with a laptop 50 feet from my client's residence at the exact time of the attempts. The courtroom went very quiet. My mom's lawyer looked like she'd just been handed a case file she hadn't read. My mom's face had gone pale. The judge took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Here's what's going to happen, he said. I'm granting a temporary restraining order. Mrs. Brennan and Mr. Brennan are prohibited from contacting the petitioner directly or indirectly. They are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her residence or workplace. They are prohibited from attempting to access any of her financial accounts, personal information, or digital assets. This order is effective immediately and will remain in place pending a full hearing in 30 days. He looked directly at my mom. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. If you attempt to contact your daughter through third parties, that's a violation. If you send flying monkeys to harass her, that's a violation. Do you understand? Your Honor, this is my daughter, my mom said, and her voice cracked just right, perfectly calibrated to sound hurt rather than angry. I have a right to communicate with my own child. You have the rights I just outlined, the judge said. Nothing more. Next case. We walked out of the courtroom and I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. The restraining order was real, legal, enforceable. My mom couldn't call me, couldn't text me, couldn't show up at my home or my office or anywhere I might be. For the first time since my dad died, I had actual legal protection from my own family. What happens now? I asked Elena as we stood in the courthouse hallway. Now we wait and see if they're smart enough to leave you alone, she said. Or stupid enough to violate the order. They were stupid enough. For days after the restraining order was granted, I got a Facebook message from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was a generic sunset photo, the kind people use when they don't want to show their face. The name was clearly fake. But the message was unmistakably from my mom. Sarah, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I need you to understand what you're doing to this family. Mia's college applications are being affected because we can't afford the fees. Ethan had to quit his travel team because we don't have the money. Victor's business is suffering because of the legal costs. You have the power to fix this. Your father would want you to fix this. Please, just think about what you're doing. I took a screenshot and sent it to Elena. Her response was immediate. Forward this to the police. File a violation report. Do not respond. I did exactly that. The police took it seriously this time. They'd already been building a case around the attempted account access. A restraining order violation on top of that was enough to escalate things. 2 days later, my mom was arrested. Not at her home, thankfully, because I didn't want Mia and Ethan to see that. But at a Starbucks where she'd agreed to meet with the detective who'd been assigned to my case. She thought she was coming in to give her side of the story. Instead, she was read her rights and taken into custody for violation of a protective order and attempted identity theft. I found out about the arrest from Elena, who found out from the prosecutor's office. I didn't feel happy about it. Didn't feel victorious or vindicated. I just felt tired and sad and angry that it had come to this. That my own mother had pushed things so far that she'd ended up in handcuffs. She was released on bail the same day. The arraignment was scheduled for 2 weeks later. And that's when things got truly surreal. Because suddenly this wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was a criminal case. The prosecutor assigned to it was a woman named Jennifer Park, mid-30s, with a reputation for taking financial crime seriously. She called me directly to go over the evidence and prepare me for what might happen next. "Your mother's attorney is going to try to make this look like a family misunderstanding," Jennifer said. "They're going to paint you as vindictive, as someone who's using the legal system to punish your mother for daring to ask for help. Are you prepared for that?" "I have evidence," I said. "Evidence is good. But you also need to be prepared for how this is going to feel. Your mother is going to sit in a courtroom and tell a judge that you're destroying her life. She's going to cry. She's going to talk about how much she sacrificed to raise you. And you're going to have to sit there and listen to it without reacting. Can you do that?" I thought about my dad, about how he'd taught me to read systems, to see patterns, to understand when someone was running a scam even when they dressed it up in the language of love. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." The arraignment was exactly as uncomfortable as Jennifer had warned it would be. My mom stood in front of the judge in that same church outfit, looking small and defeated. Her lawyer argued that this was a tragic family dispute being criminalized, that my mother had made mistakes born out of desperation and concern, that she'd already suffered enough through the restraining order and the arrest. The judge wasn't buying it. He looked at the evidence, the ring footage, the IP address logs, the fake Facebook message. He set bail conditions that included GPS monitoring and complete prohibition from any electronic contact with me. The trial date was set for 8 weeks out. And then we all went home to wait. Those 8 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to work every day like normal, attended Zoom meetings, wrote code, fixed bugs, participated in stand-ups. But underneath the normalcy, I was preparing for trial. Meeting with Jennifer Park. Reviewing evidence. Practicing testimony. Learning how to tell my story in a way that was clear and factual and wouldn't make me seem like an ungrateful daughter who'd weaponized the legal system against her own mother. Elena warned me that the defense would try to make this about the inheritance. They'd argue that I was so determined to keep every penny of my father's estate that I'd turned a simple request for help into a federal case. They'd try to make the jury sympathize with a mother who just wanted to make sure her other children were taken care of. But that's not what this case is about, Elena reminded me. This is about someone attempting to access your financial accounts without authorization. This is about someone violating a restraining order. The inheritance is context, but it's not the crime. Stay focused on the actual criminal behavior. The trial started on a Wednesday morning in early fall. I sat in the courtroom next to Jennifer Park, watching my mother take her seat across the aisle with her expensive lawyer, and I realized that this was it. This was the moment where a judge and potentially a jury would decide whether my mother's actions crossed the line from inappropriate to criminal. And whatever they decided would determine not just her future, but mine. Because if she got away with this, if she convinced 12 strangers that what she'd done was understandable and forgivable, she'd never stop. She'd keep coming for what she thought she deserved until there was nothing left of me to take. The courtroom wasn't what I'd expected. I'd seen enough legal dramas on TV to think it would be dramatic, tense, filled with objections and surprise witnesses and moments of revelation that made everyone gasp. The real thing was slower, quieter, more methodical. It felt less like a performance and more like an autopsy, everyone carefully examining the dead thing that used to be my family to figure out exactly how it died and who killed it. The prosecution went first. Jennifer Park stood up in a gray suit that probably cost less than my mom's outfit but somehow looked more professional. And she laid out the case with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. She started with my dad's death, the will, the probate process. Established that I was the legal heir to his estate. Then she walked the jury through my mom's escalating attempts to get access to that money. The family meeting with the settlement agreement. The threatening texts about legal complications and credit damage. The phishing emails that started showing up after I refused to sign. And then, the big moment, the Ring camera footage. The screen in the courtroom lit up with the grainy video from that Tuesday afternoon. There was my mom, standing near my mailbox, phone to her ear. There was Victor's SUV at the curb, him hunched over his laptop. The timestamp in the corner matched perfectly with the banking app notifications Jennifer projected on a second screen. multiple unauthorized login attempts, failed authentication, security alerts. The defendant and her husband coordinated this attack, Jennifer said, her voice calm but firm. They drove to the victim's residence, positioned themselves strategically, and attempted to gain unauthorized access to her financial accounts using information they had from their family relationship. When that failed, the defendant violated a restraining order by contacting the victim through a fake social media account. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a crime. My mom's lawyer, a woman named Patricia Hernandez who probably charged $400 an hour, stood up for the defense. She was good. I had to give her that. She didn't deny the facts because she couldn't. Instead, she tried to reframe them. Laura Brennan is a mother, Patricia said, her voice warm and sympathetic. A mother who spent 18 years raising a daughter she loves. A mother who sacrificed her own career opportunities to be a full-time parent. A mother who, after a difficult divorce, rebuilt her life and her family. When her ex-husband died suddenly, she saw an opportunity to make sure all of her children, not just one, were provided for. Was her approach misguided? Perhaps. Did she make mistakes in how she tried to communicate with her daughter? Absolutely. But criminal intent? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a family tragedy being prosecuted as a felony. She painted a picture of my mom as desperate, not malicious. As someone who'd panicked when she realized her daughter was going to keep everything and leave her other children with nothing. She suggested that the Ring camera footage was circumstantial, that maybe Victor was just checking his work email while waiting for my mom, that the timing was coincidental. She portrayed the Facebook message as a mother's last desperate attempt to reach a daughter who'd cut off all communication. Sarah Chen, Patricia said, and the way she said my name made it sound like an accusation, inherited over $800,000 from her father. Her mother, who raised her and supported her and loved her, asked for help making sure her other children could go to college. And Sarah's response was to call the police, file restraining orders, and press criminal charges. This isn't justice. This is revenge. I sat there listening to her describe me as vindictive, greedy, cruel, and I felt my hands clench under the table. Jennifer had warned me this would happen. Had told me to keep my face neutral, not to react, to let the evidence speak for itself. But it was hard. Really hard. Then it was time for testimony. Jennifer called me to the stand first. I walked up there feeling like everyone in the courtroom was judging me. Like the jury was already deciding whether I was a dutiful daughter protecting myself or a selfish monster destroying her own mother. Jennifer's questions were straightforward. She walked me through the timeline. When did you first learn about the family meeting? What did you find when you arrived? What did the settlement agreement say? I answered each question clearly, factually, the way we'd practiced. Then she asked about the phishing emails. I described receiving the fake bank alerts, how I'd recognized them as fraudulent, how they'd started showing up right after I refused to sign over my inheritance. And on the afternoon of September 14th, what happened? Jennifer asked. I received a Ring camera alert while I was working, I said. When I checked it, I saw my mother standing near my building's mailbox and my stepfather Victor in his car with a laptop. At the same time, my banking app alerted me to unauthorized login attempts. What did you do? I screen recorded everything. The Ring footage, the banking notifications, all of it. Then I called my attorney and filed a police report. Why? I looked at Jennifer, then at the jury. Because my mother had been threatening me for weeks about what would happen if I didn't give her access to my inheritance. And now she was at my home, coordinating with her husband, while someone was trying to break into my accounts. I was scared. Patricia Hernandez's cross-examination was designed to make me look paranoid and vindictive. You admit your mother raised you for 18 years? Yes. And you admit she sacrificed her career to be a stay-at-home parent? She made that choice, yes. And when she asked you to share your inheritance with your younger siblings, you refused? They're not my siblings. They're her stepchildren. And yes, I refused to give away money my father explicitly left to me. You didn't even consider it? I considered it for about 10 seconds. Then I remembered that my father had written a will specifically because he knew my mother would do exactly this. Patricia tried to trip me up, tried to make me seem cold or calculating, but I'd spent 8 weeks preparing for this. Every question she asked, I answered calmly, factually, without emotion. When she was done, I stepped down and returned to my seat. Jennifer called her digital forensics expert next, a man named Dr. Raymond Park who'd analyzed the IP addresses and login attempts. He testified that the unauthorized access attempts originated from a mobile hotspot registered to Victor Brennan's business account. That the geolocation data from that hotspot placed it within 50 meters of my residence at the exact time of the attempts. That based on the pattern and timing, this was consistent with a coordinated attack, not a coincidence. Patricia tried to poke holes in his testimony, suggested that IP addresses could be spoofed or that someone else could have been using Victor's hotspot. But Dr. Park was unshakable. The data was clear. The pattern was unmistakable. Then the prosecution rested. Patricia called her own witnesses for the defense. Character witnesses. Mostly. People who'd known my mom for years and could testify that she was a good person, a loving mother, someone who'd never been in trouble before. A woman from her book club. A neighbor from her gated community. Even Mia, my 17-year-old stepsister, who took the stand looking terrified and said that my mom had always been kind to her, had always provided for her, had been crying every night since this whole thing started. I felt bad for Mia. She was a kid caught in the middle of something she didn't understand. But her testimony didn't change the facts. Then Patricia called my mom to the stand. This was what everything had been building toward. My mom took the oath with her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down in the witness box looking like the victim of a terrible injustice. Patricia led her through her version of events. How she'd been devastated by my father's death despite their divorce. How she'd wanted to make sure I was okay. How she'd suggested the family meeting to discuss options, not to pressure me. How she'd driven to my building that day just hoping to talk, not to commit a crime. I was worried about Sarah, my mom said, her voice breaking at exactly the right moment. She'd cut off all communication. She wouldn't return my calls. I just wanted to make sure she was okay. I didn't know Victor was trying to check something on his laptop. I had no idea our timing would look suspicious. She was good. Really good. If I hadn't known the truth, if I hadn't seen her threaten me, manipulate me, coordinate with Victor in real time, I might have believed her myself. Then it was Jennifer's turn for cross-examination. Mrs. Brennan, you testified that you just wanted to make sure Sarah was okay when you drove to her residence. Is that correct? Yes. But you didn't knock on her door or try to call her from the parking lot? I thought she might not answer if she knew it was me. So instead you stood near her mailbox on your phone, for approximately 7 minutes? I was talking to a friend. I don't see how that's relevant. The same friend who helped you create the fake Facebook account you used to contact Sarah after the restraining order was issued? My mom's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Jennifer pulled out a document. This is a subpoena return from Facebook showing that the account, Sunset Dreams 247, was created from an IP address registered to your home internet connection. The same account that sent Sarah a message 4 days after you were legally prohibited from contacting her. Did you create that account? I may have. I don't remember. You don't remember creating a fake account to violate a restraining order? I just wanted to talk to my daughter. That's not a crime. Actually, Mrs. Brennan, it is. Violating a restraining order is a crime. That's why we're here. Jennifer methodically dismantled every part of my mom's testimony. Showed her the texts where she'd threatened legal complications. Played the voicemail where her voice turned sharp when she talked about making things difficult for me. Displayed the settlement agreement that would have transferred 65% of my inheritance. This wasn't about making sure Sarah was okay, Jennifer said. This was about accessing money you felt entitled to. And when she refused to give it to you voluntarily, you tried to take it by force. The trial lasted 3 days total. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, I was sitting next to Jennifer Park with my hands folded in my lap, trying not to shake. The 4 women stood up. The judge asked if they'd reached a verdict. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted identity theft, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of violation of a protective order, how do you find? Guilty. The courtroom stayed quiet, but I heard my mom make a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Victor, sitting in the gallery, put his head in his hands. Mia and Ethan, who'd come for the verdict, looked shell-shocked. Sentencing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Jennifer told me that given my mom's lack of criminal history, She'd probably get probation, maybe some community service, definitely fines and restitution. But when the sentencing hearing came, Judge Morrison had clearly read the case file carefully and wasn't inclined to be lenient. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, looking down at her from the bench, "you committed these crimes against your own daughter. Someone who should have been able to trust you. Someone who was grieving the loss of her father. You saw her vulnerability as an opportunity. That shows a level of predatory behavior that concerns this court deeply." He sentenced her to 18 months in county jail, with possibility of early release after 9 months for good behavior. 3 years of probation after that. A $50,000 fine. Full restitution for my legal costs, which totaled another $32,000. And a permanent restraining order prohibiting her from contacting me for 5 years after her release. Additionally, the judge said, "I'm referring this case to the California State Bar to review Mr. Brennan's real estate license. Using your professional access to technology and information to commit fraud raises serious questions about your fitness to hold that license." I watched Victor's face crumble as he understood what that meant. No real estate license meant no luxury home sales. No commissions. No income to maintain the lifestyle my mom had built her entire identity around. My mom was taken into custody immediately. She looked back at me as the bailiff led her away, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not love. Not regret. Just pure, undiluted hatred for the daughter who'd refused to be used. I walked out of the courtroom and stood in the hallway, trying to process what had just happened. Elena came out a moment later and put her hand on my shoulder. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. Like I just watched my family die for the second time. "Your family died when your father did," Elena said gently. "What you just did was refuse to be cannibalized by people wearing your family's skin." 6 months passed. My mom served her time in a minimum security facility. I didn't visit. Didn't write. Didn't send money for commissary. I heard through Mia, who'd started therapy and eventually reached out with a careful boundary-respecting email, that my mom spent most of her time in jail angry. Angry at me. Angry at the system. Angry at everyone except herself. Victor's real estate license was suspended pending review. Without that income, they had to sell the big house in Orange County. Had to downsize to a small apartment. Had to actually live within their means for the first time in years. Mia got into college on her own merit, with financial aid and scholarship she'd earned herself. She wrote me another email telling me about it, thanking me in a strange way for forcing their family to face reality. Ethan, she said, had gotten a part-time job. Was learning what it meant to work for things instead of having them handed over. I took the inheritance my dad left me and I used it the way he would have wanted. Paid off my student loans. Maxed out my retirement contributions. Put a down payment on a small house in North County with an ocean view from the 2nd floor. Set up a scholarship fund at my dad's alma mater for first-generation college students studying computer science. The rest went into index funds, growing quietly the way my dad had taught me, building wealth the boring, responsible way that actually works. I thought about my mom sometimes. Wondered if she'd learned anything from all of this. Wondered if she'd ever understand that love isn't supposed to come with a price tag, that family isn't supposed to be transactional, that you can't steal someone's future and call it fairness. But mostly I just lived my life. Went to work. Hung out with friends who didn't need anything from me except my company. Sat on my back deck watching the sunset over the Pacific, drinking coffee my dad would have approved of because it was on sale. 1 year after the sentencing, I got a letter. It had been forwarded through Elena's office, no return address, but I recognized my mom's handwriting on the envelope. I held it for a long time, debating whether to open it or just throw it away. Finally, I opened it. The letter was short. "Sarah, I'm writing this because my therapist said I need to take accountability. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for trying to steal from you. I'm sorry for putting you through the trial. I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. Mom." I read it 3 times. Looking for the catch, the manipulation, the part where she'd try to make me feel guilty or suggest reconciliation or ask for something. But it wasn't there. It was just an apology. Flat, simple, maybe even genuine. I didn't write back. Maybe I would someday. Maybe I wouldn't. The important thing was that the choice was mine. I wasn't obligated to forgive her just because we shared DNA. wasn't required to maintain a relationship just because she'd given birth to me. I got to decide what family meant to me now. And I decided it meant people who protected your future instead of trying to steal it. People who celebrated your success instead of resenting it. People who understood that love isn't a transaction and care isn't conditional. My dad left me more than money. He left me the knowledge that I deserve to be protected, even from people who claimed to love me. He left me the courage to say no when everyone else expected me to say yes. He left me the understanding that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is refuse to be consumed by people who think your purpose is to feed their hunger. My mom tried to steal my inheritance. Instead, she gave me something even more valuable. Proof that I was strong enough to stand alone. And honestly, that was worth more than any amount of money she could have taken. So here's what I want you to understand, and I really want you to hear this. If someone in your family is pressuring you about money, about inheritance, about what you owe them because of biology, you're not crazy for feeling uncomfortable. You're not selfish for saying no. You're not a bad person for protecting what's yours. Family doesn't get to rob you just because they know your birthday and your social security number. Love doesn't come with a price tag. And if someone tells you it does, if someone makes you feel guilty for having boundaries around your finances and your future, they're not acting like family. They're acting like criminals. And you have every right to treat them accordingly. Drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever had a family member try to manipulate you over money? Have you ever felt guilty for protecting your own financial future? Because I promise you, you're not alone. And you're not wrong for choosing yourself over people who only see you as a resource. My father taught me that everything has a price. My mother taught me that some people will try to make you pay it forever. And I learned, through all of this, that the most expensive thing you can do is sacrifice your future to fund someone else's entitlement. Choose yourself. Protect your boundaries. And never, ever let anyone convince you that defending what's yours makes you the villain in their story.